The brutality demonstrated by Islamic State, also known as ISIS, over the past year has forced tens of thousands of Christians to flee from cities in Iraq with significant Christian populations like Mosul and Karakush. Most come to Kurdistan, Iraq's northern autonomous Kurdish region, seeking safety and shelter. Hans and his wife Hala left everything behind in Bartella, which is located near Mosul, escaping just before ISIS arrived.
They come in the night when Kurdish force withdraws from our areas. So the ISIS come in the night, about 3 or 4 a.m. And then we took our things, only clothes, and then we flee to this place.
I felt like everything was destroyed, and I lived in fear because I worried about my family, my husband. They destroyed everything in our lives.
195 Christian families, that's 825 people, along with 25 Yazidis families, came here to Hazani. They came from 8 surrounding villages. Now, they were chased from their homes because of the violent assaults of Islamic State, also known as ISIS. They received Bible Plus packs from the Voice of the Martyrs.
When we heard the news of this terrible situation, our hearts started to cry for you, and we started to pray very hard.
لما سمعنا الأخبار والأشياء اللي عانيتوها فيها قلوبنا صارت تبكي على موتكم وبدها تصلي على موتكم.
We told people about your story, and they had tears coming down.
خبرنا كل العالم على قصتكم والناس بدموع بدها تستقبل هاي الكلمات.
And we asked them, please, not only pray, but give some money so we can help.
I want to thank God for you people coming here and remembering us in this situation. It's important to pray for us, for our children, our families. It's a very difficult life here. I pray God will give you more so you can continue to help us.
There are many displaced Christians in Iraq. Some are living in tents or an unfinished shopping mall in the Kurdish capital of Erbil, which is being utilized as an emergency shelter for more than 200 Christian families or 1,500 people. Some have found refuge in churches. Here in Koya, 128 families are housed in 2 churches as they face an uncertain future. Hussam is a married father of 2 young sons and left a shoe business behind that he owned before the ISIS takeover of Karakush. Now, prior to the attacks, Hussam was able to provide a comfortable home for his young family in what was considered Iraq's largest Christian city. Although he and his wife are very thankful to have a safe place of refuge to which they can care for their children, they must share a small space inside a church facility, along with Hussam's parents, plus his brothers and their families.
In the morning of the 6th of August, we heard bombs everywhere. Those explosions killed 2 children in our neighborhood. I felt I needed to protect my family, and I was feeling fear, so I decided to leave immediately.
As for the future, Hussam, like many other displaced Iraqi Christians, just wants to go home and return to normal life the way they had once known it. Yet failing that, he will need to find another country where he can look after his family in safety. Ida Hannah also wants to live in safety with her family. But as you'll soon hear, that is not her first priority right now. Ida's story is heartbreaking and demonstrates the evil and coldness of ISIS. She tells of the events leading up to her ongoing nightmare.
On the 6th of August, ISIS attacked Karakush. I heard the explosions. Many people, including children and young people, died in the attack.
For the next 10 days, Ida and her husband Badu, who is blind, and their 3-year-old daughter Christina stayed in their home, not knowing what would happen next, living in fear. Thankfully, her other 3 children, including her 11-year-old son Christmas, had escaped to safety. Suddenly, ISIS broke their silence.
From the loudspeakers, we heard Allah Akbar, and the ISIS people announced all the Christians needed to leave the area, and if we didn't, they said they were going to kill us. They also said you can stay if you accept Islam. Do that or leave.
The militant Muslim group then rounded up all the Christians and brought them to a health center and briefly separated the men from the women.
They opened our luggage and took things like gold and money and left our luggage on the ground and made us go to the bus. After that, me, my husband, and daughter all went to the bus. We didn't take anything. I just held my daughter. Suddenly, one of the ISIS people just took her. He took my daughter from me. I started crying and my husband asked me what had happened. I said, "They have taken our daughter." I followed him off the bus into a building.
Ida says Christina was then given to an older man with a long beard. She believes he was the leader of the ISIS group in that area and described him as having evil eyes. She pleaded with him to give her young daughter back, but he ordered her to get back on the bus. He told her to shut up and that if she said another word or came near her daughter, he would call his men to slaughter her right there.
I was begging him, and my daughter was crying and screaming because she needed her mother. But he looked at me with his dark eyes and said, "Go now," and I started to cry. I felt like they were going to kill me if I stayed even one more minute.
Ida returned to the bus distraught. Her husband was unable to chase after his wife and daughter because of his blindness. The Christians were then taken to the desert and dropped off with nothing. From there, they had to walk 7 hours to get to Erbil, where they were finally given food, water, and shelter in tents. Later, they would move to this unfinished shopping mall.
When we arrived here, my oldest son, who was 23 years old, asked me, "Where is my sister?" And I told him that she was taken, that she is gone. He became like crazy and started to cry and said they can't do that.
Although Ida reported to the local authorities in Erbil that her daughter was abducted by ISIS, she was told there was little they could do. 3 times she tried to go back to her village, but each time was prevented by the guards of the checkpoint from doing so, fearing ISIS would kill her.
I'm only asking God for my daughter to be returned to me. I need my daughter to come to me, to be back on my knee, and that she is healthy. That is all I need. I'll never lose hope that I will see her again. I just don't know when. I believe God can do it. I have dreams about her every single day.
VOM partner Ray Thorne read an emotional letter from a mother in the U.S. to Ida.
Words cannot express my grief
كلمات ما تقدر تعبر عن مشاعري
over the loss of your little girl.
لأنك خسرت بنتي.
I read your story
أنا قرأت القصة مالتي.
And I sat and wept while I was at work.
وأنا يعني بدي أصلي لك وبدي أبكي على موت بنتي.
She said, I wept for you and your family.
إحنا بكينا عليك وعلى العائلة كلها.
She said, I have a 3-year-old daughter of my own.
أنا عندي بنت عمرها 3 سنين.
The thought of losing her is crushing.
إنه أفقدها فشي خيالي موزي.
The Lord is near to the brokenhearted.
الله قريب من أحياء القلب الضعيفين.
And saves the crushed in spirit.
Evangelical pastor Saba, along with his family and congregation members, was also thankful to arrive safely in the city of Erbil. They escaped after ISIS had captured their Christian community of Mosul, Iraq's second largest city, an ancient city that traces its Christian heritage back to the 1st century. Pastor Saba recounts what took place during the invasion.
On the 6th of June, we had an all-night prayer meeting. In the morning, the people were going to their houses, but the roads were closed, and we had to stay at the church for 3 nights. Every night, we prayed very hard for Mosul.
The Christians were told by ISIS they could leave Mosul immediately, leaving everything behind, including their cars. At great risk, Saba approached some of the Islamic jihadists at a checkpoint, asking them if they could take their cars to leave the city. Surprisingly, they said yes.
I told them we have families, children. The ISIS people told me this was illegal, but go and get your cars, and we left that night. As we started to leave, we heard bombs exploding everywhere. We left very fast. The ISIS people took over the whole city.
Saba, his family, and others from the church took the first road to Erbil, which is about 90 kilometers from Mosul. But before they could get into Erbil, they would have to wait over 14 hours at a checkpoint as Kurdish troops would search each vehicle for members of ISIS.
I was afraid, but I was able to contact all the members of our church, and I knew they were on the road and out of the danger area.
You had 18 families in your church, 70 people. ISIS came, you had to disperse, people left. You started the church, you were the church planter. How did you feel when the congregation all had to flee?
That was so difficult. I planted the church in 2006 and built up that church. It's a part of me, a part of my body. It was so difficult to see our people have to leave their homes and just walk. These are my people. This is my nation. I am so sorry.
Pastor Saba, now in his mid-60s, passed up an opportunity while living in Amman, Jordan, to bring his family to Canada in 2006, instead returning to his hometown of Mosul to start a church. He says his work there isn't finished and hopes to return someday, even though ISIS has taken over his beloved city, church, and house and caused so much destruction.
One day we will go back, but not right now. It will take some time.
15 of the 18 families from his church are now at the Christian and Missionary Alliance Church in Erbil. One family from Saba's church that left prior to ISIS taking over Mosul is Hannah and her 3 children. Hannah's husband Salman was murdered by militant Muslims in March of 2012 because of his ministry. He had brought 7 Muslims to Christ before he was kidnapped and shot 9 times. After Salman was martyred, Hannah and her children went to the Christian city of Karakush, only to have to flee again when ISIS came to the area in the summer of 2014.
I felt I needed to run away from them because they are the same people who killed my husband in Mosul. Now they will kill me and my children, so I prepared myself to leave. It was very hard. After leaving Mosul, we started a new home in Karakush. I bought things like furniture. I didn't know what was happening. Now I'm in Erbil and it's very hard. There is more tragedy in my life.
Hannah says without Jesus in her life, there is no way she could continue living.
After 3 years since Salman died, it's only Jesus Christ who gives me strength to take what is going on.
When I interviewed Hannah in 2013, at that time we needed to hide her identity for security reasons. She said she wanted to stay in Iraq and continue her late husband's ministry in Mosul. But since ISIS has invaded, that's no longer possible. It's just too dangerous.
My life is for my children, just to protect them. It's very difficult for me. I like my country, but I can't take it anymore.
Hannah's oldest daughter, Sarah, was recently married and living near her in Erbil. Sarah was in her 4th year at the university in Mosul as a biology student. But when ISIS captured the city, they destroyed most of the documents at the university, including all of Sarah's university records.
I was getting ready for my final exam of the year, but I couldn't do it because of what happened. That made me angry. I just cried.
Sarah says God will find a solution for her education. Sarah is very close to her mother and says her faith and strength helped her deal with her own loss and pain when her father was murdered.
It was difficult for her when my dad was killed, but she has been a very good example to me.
Hannah had not yet seen the report that we did on her and her husband Salman that not only aired across Canada, but around the world. Rebecca and Ali had been married for over 2 decades and were raising their 3 children in Mosul. a large city in the northwest. Hannah got emotional watching the video, but is grateful that the Lord has used it to strengthen Christians in their faith and used it to bring others to Jesus.
My husband was a good believer, and he evangelized people to believe in Jesus Christ. What he said before he died was that if he died, there would be a reason for it, and that others would come to know Jesus, and this is what happened through many TV stations.
The Voice of the Martyrs has helped Hannah and her family since the death of Salman, and will continue to do so into the future, for which they are grateful.